Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. As tensions continue to rise on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea has once again raised concerns with its recent missile launches into the East Sea. The timing of this provocation coincides with the unveiling of the Trump administration's 2026 National Defense Strategy, which signals a shift in U.S. defense posture and its relationship with South Korea. With new priorities, including South Korea taking a lead role in conventional defense, experts are now questioning how these changes will impact the alliance and what challenges South Korea may face in navigating the growing U.S. China competition alongside the ongoing threat from the north. For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined in the studio by Kim Mok-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy. Good to see you, Dr. Go.
It's good to see you as well.
And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Bruce Klinger, Senior Fellow at the Marine and Mike Mansfield Foundation. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So let's first start a discussion with Dr. Go. So like I've said, North Korea had fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles just yesterday, marking its second provocation, I believe, this year. What do you think is behind the latest move?
Well, I think the first time North Korea carried out this missile test this year was coincided with President Lee's visit to Beijing. And I think clearly the intention there was expressing displeasure, not so much in South Korea, but probably in China. Clearly North Korea wasn't too happy to see South Korea and China developing better relations with each other. This time around, I think it probably shouldn't, not so directed at the external audience, but probably internal. Because we are nearing the start of the Ninth Party Congress. It's believed that it's going to take place next week in February. So I think North Koreans want to showcase the fact that one of the major achievements of the last 5 years for North Korea has been this gigantic leap North Korea has been able to make in terms of weapons development. And then there will be a martial tone to the Ninth Party Congress as expected. So I think this is more about firework to mark the beginning of the Ninth Party Congress, in my view.
So more of an internal motivation we could be seeing. Now, this latest move actually comes as the Trump administration recently released its 2026 National Defense Strategy as well. Dr. Klinger, what are the most notable changes in this strategy, and how do you assess its overall direction?
There really are very significant changes. It's much more conciliatory towards rogue regimes than the Trump first term's national security strategy and national defense strategy. It really signals a retrenchment of America's commitment to our allies. What we see is that it's no longer depicted as in the first Trump term as a great power competition with China, that an ideological battle, that's gone. Also gone from the strategy from the first term is criticism of the abhorrent nature of regimes of China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. There's no longer the long list of threats, including from military from those regimes. There's no longer a pledge to uphold American values, such as human rights in other countries. And even there is a pledge of non-interference in other countries. Which really is a step back from decades of bipartisan U.S. advocacy for human rights. And most notably, there's no mention of North Korean denuclearization, as there was not that mention either in the national security strategy. Another major emphasis is burden sharing, where our allies should take primary responsibility for their defense. The U.S. is now stepping back to a more, what is called critical but more limited support of our allies. Certainly an abandonment of, say, the Ronald Reagan pledge to be there with our allies shoulder to shoulder, et cetera. And one raises questions, what's the impact on the operations plan? Are we still committed to providing all of the troops in the agreed upon bilateral operations plan? So really it's an abandonment of decades of U.S. policy. It's a reduced commitment to our allies. I fear it has an impact on reducing overall deterrence against regimes.
Right, so we've seen a lot of changes, and it actually took our attention a lot, but let's dive into them one by one. So one of the significant shifts is that South Korea is expected to take the lead in conventional defense, while the U.S. offers more limited support. Dr. Go, what does this new alliance structure really mean for the relationship?
I think it's a continuation of the discussions that's been taking place between Washington and Seoul in terms of burden sharing. So a central piece of President Lee's defense policy is the accelerated OPCON transfer for the South Korean forces. So this is, in that sense, it doesn't really contradict the South Korean policy or strategic objectives. And in fact, that's the reason why the reception of this national defense strategy, which is a very radical departure from the previous ones, as Bruce has just correctly pointed out, has been kind of muted in Seoul because essentially the Seoul and Washington are in the same program when it comes to Seoul assuming more burden or responsibility for its own defense. But also, as Bruce has pointed out, so the United States is going to take a backseat to in terms of alliance defense of South Korea, just by limiting its responsibility to providing this ambiguous term, the critical but limited support for the South Korea's defense against the North. And also, it highlights the fact that South Korea is now fully capable of defending itself against North Korea. So clearly there's going to be a clear division of labor between South Korea and the United States when it comes to the North Korean threat. So South Korea is going to take the primary responsibility to defend itself against North Korea. United States will take a secondary position or role in helping South Korea to defend itself. Instead, the United States is going to focus much of its energy on the so-called first island chain defense. And the United States is taking a backseat. And so that's all, as I said at the beginning, that's not really in contradiction to South Korea's own defense policy now. But on the other hand, what's concerning for many watchers in Seoul is the lack of the emphasis or recommitment or confirmation of commitment for extended deterrence. So perhaps extended deterrence is first under the rubric of the critical but limited support. But nonetheless, it's really troubling to see or not be able to see the mentioning of extended deterrence for South Korea because the United States is asking South Korea to assume conventional responsibility without really making a statement about the deterrence against the North Korea's nuclear threat. So this void or the gap has to be filled, I think, sooner rather than later.
Definitely, definitely, we should be. Now, following this NDS release, as Dr. Go has just touched upon, Elbridge Colby, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, visited South Korea and emphasized the importance of transitioning wartime operational control to Seoul. Dr. Klinger, how realistic is it that this will lead to a faster OPCON transfer or change the role of U.S. forces Korea?
I think it's much more likely that OPCON transition could occur under a Trump administration than any other U.S. administration. Prior to returning to government, Elbridge Colby had said he was in favor of OPCON transition. And I think there's really a split between perhaps the U.S. military and the U.S. policymakers. The military, including General Brunson, commander on the peninsula, has continually re-emphasized the importance of fulfilling the conditions required for OPCON transition, the conditions that were agreed upon between the U.S. and South Korea. There are three major tasks, including an improvement in the security situation on the Korean Peninsula, which is usually interpreted as a denuclearization of North Korea. Also, there are 125 subtasks and other duties that South Korea must demonstrate they have the capability for. So it remains, I think, on the military side, still a very tangible, very conditional requirement before OPCON transition happens. Now, I think at the higher level, the policymakers may see it as really a political decision. They may direct the military to say that, yes, the conditions have been met, and therefore we can make the transition. There's a concern that once you have OPCON transition, even though the U.S. is still involved in Combined Forces Command, that it could lead to an unzipping of the alliance, that the U.S. may no longer feel as bound by its treaty commitments to defend Korea if we're not in charge of the Combined Forces Command. So Lee Jae-myung may be pushing on an open door when he wants OPCON transition within his term.
Right. So, with that, saying with that, what's even more concerning is that Colby also hinted at the broadening role of U.S. forces Korea to counter China, in addition to its focus on North Korea. So, if that kind of shift happens, Dr. Go, what strategic dilemmas will South Korea actually face?
Well, we don't have to go that far. I don't think even before we reach the strategic dilemma phase, we have to think about the operational phase of the or operationalization of the alliance from now on. So if the U.S. forces in Korea is more specialized in deterring China rather than North Korea, and South Korea assumes the primary responsibility of deterring North Korea, then the problem with that is that there's a potential decoupling of mission between USFK and South Korean forces. So if there's a conflict between North and South, would the United States forcing South Korea stay out of the conflict? Is that even possible? So there are all these hypotheticals that they deserve to be an answer, but at the same time, it also creates these potential scenarios in which the United States is no longer having a deterrence role in South Korea, then which is, goes to what Bruce just mentioned about the unzipping of the alliance between Seoul and Washington. So it really goes to the very existential question of why we host the U.S. forces in South Korea. And so also this dilemma can go the other way. If there's a conflict between China and the United States in the environs of the Korean Peninsula, does South Korea have the option of staying out of it? Which is unlikely, but at the same time, the way the alliance is being framed right now in the new NDS is actually leaves open the possibility. So I think there's a lot of, this NDS is actually in many ways a declaratory policy. I think I put too much emphasis on the declaring that this NDS represents a break from the past. By doing so, has essentially created voids, spaces to be filled by new answers down the road. So I think that's going to be a homework or task for both Seoul and Washington.
Right, a very important point, how South Korea navigates balancing its deterrence strategy with managing relations with both Washington and Beijing will be very important moving forward. Now, let's focus on North Korea then. The NDS calls its nuclear and missile capabilities a clear and present danger to the United States homeland. Dr. Klinger, do you see this framing affecting the U.S.'s approach to extended deterrence in Korea?
I think very much so. Whereas you might think that a clear and present danger to the United States, the response would be we would certainly take care of it. We would implement all measures to defend ourselves as well as our allies. Instead, there's this sort of conditional approach towards how we defend ourselves and our allies. Before he went back into government, Elbridge Colby said it's not rational to risk losing multiple U.S. cities in response to a North Korean threat. And he said that if North Korea were to threaten 5 U.S. cities, any U.S. president would have to give pause to responding or to fulfilling our commitment to our allies. He criticized the nuclear umbrella approach of the Biden administration as well as previous administrations. He said that exposed U.S. cities to the threat. So. And I believe the phrase nuclear umbrella was omitted from the national defense strategy as well as the national security strategy. So there's not that, we will bear any burden sense of the U.S. commitment to South Korea or other allies. So that raises the question of if there were a resumption of negotiations with North Korea, would the U.S. accept limiting the range of North Korean missiles so that they didn't threaten the American homeland, but still continue to threaten our allies. And also, Colby and others have prioritized defending Taiwan over defending South Korea, seeing it as a prioritization issue. So I think all of it raises serious questions about the U.S. commitment, not only on extended deterrence, but the overall defense of our allies.
Right. So it's really a big concern for South Korea's part. But it also leads to another issue that we've just pointed out a while ago. The NDS, it doesn't really mention North Korea's denuclearization. Instead, it focuses on flexible realism and prioritizing America's interests. Dr. Go, how should we read into this? And do you think North Korea could be led to think that the U.S. is tacitly accepting its nuclear weapons?
Well, I think to answer your last question first, I think it's unlikely because I think the national defense strategy, unlike the national security strategy, makes it very clear that North Korea represents one of the existential threats to the U.S. mainland. So in that sense, I think the North Korea is not going to harbor any fantasy that United States might accept the fact that North Korea is a nuclear state. I don't think it's likely. But on the other hand, I think it's troubling that the denuclearization doesn't appear in the document. And I think there's probably an explanation for that. And then the reason I think this happened is because I think that this national defense strategy is intended, unlike the past ones, is intended to represent essentially a statement that the United States from now on is going to reorder its priorities when it comes to national defense. So if before the United States was essentially listing out all the threats and also proposing solutions and approaches to handle those challenges, now it's about emphasizing the fact that the United States is going to put its prioritize the threat coming from China. So, and the document goes extensively in describing what will be the new strategy in rising up to the challenge of China's growing threat in this part of the world. So in that sense, I think denuclearization kind of falls by the wayside. And I think, but instead of reading this as this omission as a potential signal to accepting North Korea as a nuclear state, I think it's more about showing the fact that the United States will approach North Korea's denuclearization as a diplomatic problem. So this is about national defense strategy rather than foreign policy document. Foreign policy strategy, sorry, it's part of the foreign policy, obviously, but it's not a foreign policy strategy. So it shows that the Department of War from now on is going to focus all its attention and effort in deterring China rather than North Korea, which is going to be secondary to its mission.
Right. So as Dr. Go has mentioned, when we say like North Korea is considering this as a foreign policy strategy, some people actually they believe that the Trump administration is it's making a deal-making approach to bring back North Korea into the negotiating table. So if talks actually do resume, Dr. Klinger, what should the U.S.'s realistic goals would be?
Well, President Trump certainly is eager to resume dialogue with Kim Jong-un. He repeatedly praises his great relationship with Kim. And when Trump visited South Korea last year, he said he would like to meet with Kim, though Kim didn't respond to the invitation. And there are a number of reasons why Kim would not be interested in resuming dialogue. I mean, some talk about the humiliation in Hanoi and not having a deal and Trump walking away. But I think more importantly is that North Korea is getting massive amounts of benefits, food, fuel, funding, and perhaps military technology from Russia, far more than it could ever get from the United States, and with little or no conditions. So I think Kim probably doesn't see a reason for re-engaging with the United States. Now, that said, they've left the door open a little bit, but emphasizing that denuclearization could not be on the table. So if there were a resumption in negotiations, first, Trump must do no harm. He shouldn't accept a peace declaration that North Korea has in the past offered. That would provide the illusion of progress on reducing the North Korean threat to the United States and our allies, but certainly would actually not reduce the threat in any way. It would provide a false sense of security and perhaps provide a perceived justification for reducing U.S. forces on the peninsula or our overall commitment. If there is a negotiation, or I'm sorry, an agreement, it has to be far better than in the past. There has to be more carefully crafted text than the vague documents we had in the past with North Korea. And there has to be a very rigorous, intrusive verification regime, as we had in arms control agreements with the Soviet Union.
Right, definitely. So with all of these developments ongoing, there are some concerns that U.S. priorities, it might shift towards defending its homeland rather than focusing on commitments with its allies. So how realistic is this shift, Dr. Go? And what should Korea actually demand for, to maintain trust in the alliance?
Well, I think so. It's very likely that the United States, from now on, is going to focus more on the region immediately surrounding the country, essentially the Western Hemisphere, and I think it makes sense. I think it's also intuitive for the U.S. public because if you classify or define the threat, national security threats, beyond the military domain, and then also include non-military threats, clearly the United States is being challenged by the narco trafficking and also as illegal immigration, which represents sorts of hybrid threats that have undermined the fabrics of the U.S. society. So I think it's more intuitive for the U.S. public to accept the fact that the United States is going to focus more on defending itself rather than, say, the security of the allies. So, but having said that, clearly the flip side of that the equation is the fact that the allies are going to question the U.S. commitment to defend the allies, and I think that's where the biggest challenge lies for the allies of the United States as well as for the United States. So I think in the particular case of Seoul, I think we are probably in a little bit of better of situation than other U.S. allies, especially in Europe, because clearly there's a tension between U.S. allies, European allies of the United States and the United States, as evidenced by the recent controversy over Greenland. When it comes to Seoul and Washington, at least the two governments are on the same page about South Korea having to assume more responsibility for its own defense and the United States focusing more on deterring China. So I think I don't see an immediate friction between the two sides. I think it's going to be whatever friction that rises or tension that rises, it's going to be manageable. At least for the short to medium term. But I think, as I mentioned, I think Bruce also mentioned over and over, the key question remains about how to work together with, Seoul and Washington regarding the North Korea's denuclearization, which has been omitted in the National Defense Strategy document, but also about extending the deterrence. That's very much in question right now. So I think this is remain to be answered, and that's going to be one of the key challenges that the two allies face in managing their relationship.
Right. So a lot of discussions still remain between the two, but we will have to stay vigilant and work to ensure that the alliance remains strong. We'll have to keep our discussion here, leave our discussion right here tonight. Thank you so much for your insights, Dr. Go.
My pleasure.
And of course, Dr. Klinger, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.